And we are live, or at least we are recording. So I'm here with Magenta. We're going to continue the conversation around Girard. It's getting more and more exciting. Hello, Magenta. How are you doing?
Hello, Laszlo. I am doing just great, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm ready to go. I've got some new research to present.
Well, I'm really like sitting the edge of my seat. I have to admit that this whole Girardian exploration, it's been fascinating so far, and the rabbit hole is getting deeper and deeper. So it's the first set of ideas that I encountered, which I'm just having these revelations and epiphanies, these pennies dropping all over the place, even though it seems like so simple, mimetic desire. And yeah, I get it. We're imitating beings, and yeah, we choose the scapegoats. It seems like so simple, but you just keep like peeling away the layers upon layers upon layers, and it's connected to everything. So I think we're going to find a lot of answers in this, and also with the Boyo spin, we'll try to make it a little bit more practical and applicable to the individual. So I'm very excited. Just lay it on me.
Yeah, that's right. And it keeps just getting deeper and deeper because, like, you read a book, you go, oh yeah, that's a nice theory. But then, Laszlo, what happens? You have what is basically a mimetic crisis. Like, and you go into these emotions for some reason over something with some person, and you go, oh my God, I'm having a mimetic crisis.
What do you mean by mimetic crisis specifically?
Well,
in this case?
They talk about in the psychology, Girard talks about, how you've got these friends and they're going on fine, and then suddenly there's a conflict or a problem, and it's like everyone feels bad and it's terrible, and he sort of terms it the mimetic crisis. True. But like when you actually experience it, like you do, because like we're all puppets of desire, puppets of imitation. You go, oh my God, this is it, and then like the pennies not just drop, like your whole brain gets blown apart, and then afterwards you have post mimetic stress analytic disorder.
I like it like PTSD, but it would be like post PMTSD, right? Post mimetic trauma.
Yeah, and then I had in addition to that, I had post-traumatic mimetic analytical disorder because I was analyzing the crisis that I had.
Okay, anyway. Maybe that's the reason why you always say that Girard is pretty bleak, and I kind of get what you're saying this, but maybe I just always enjoy these crises, I just find them exciting. I just find it exciting to exist in that state of wow. Like, okay, my conception of the world has been blown apart, and I just like to swim in those waters, So maybe it's a good combination. I don't actually find Girard to be a traumatizing experience. I don't find it to be bleak, But let's see how these come together.
Well, the theme of today, Laszlo, as it happens, is the research question that I put to you and to the Boyos is, Girard, bleak or liberating?
You see, we are on the same page then. I didn't know this, by the way, but then let's follow that.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna just present some research to start with. I have to find my screen. I have to share screen first, don't I?
I think so.
Okay, share screen, and then we choose this one. Now, I think, have you seen this graph before, Laszlo? This is
yes. You posted this. You posted it a couple of months ago, right? I loved it.
That's right. This is from the International Center for Boyo Studies. That's the ICBS.
Wow, this is an old one, and I found it to be super accurate. Like, this is like a year old, right? But it's
quite an old graph, and this is my problem. This is the thing. This is the new research. You see, this I just wanted to give the Boyos a bit of background on this previous research that has been undertaken. And you can see on the left hand of the graph here the is it the x-axis, the one that goes?
No, I think the y. Yeah, so the x-axis is the horizontal, and then
yes.
the y-axis is the.
Well, on the y-axis, then on the y-axis, just to be technical, the y-axis, we have life consciousness balance. So that's something that's measuring life consciousness balance. And up here at the top, you've essentially got like, you know, like out of your mind with like insane new ideas, and at the bottom, you know, you've got like I'm just going to work, and it's really I work.
It's like mundane. It's okay.
Yeah.
Monday, everyday existence, kind of dry, kind of black and white, and then on top, it's like a psychedelic fever dream. Right?
That's it. You've got it. So you can see there's and that I mean, the people who put this together have actually got a very precise conceptual framework around it, and you know, the definitional metadata is all there if anyone wants it.
Oh, I'm sure.
along the bottom we have elapsed time. That's I believe that is the x-axis. Along the bottom there is elapsed time, so in months, right? And you see, this is you can tell it's dated because it's regarding Jordan Peterson. It's called the official Jordan Peterson adjustment trajectory, and it was a psychological research done. And as you can see, here you are, you know, you're a boyo, you're going along your normal life. You're not really bored, but you know, you're not really excited either. But anyway, you're sort of below halfway going along, and then you encounter Jordan Peterson. You're like, oh my God. And then what happens is you drop right down because you go into a kind of catatonic state of, oh fuck, I mean, excuse me, oh, I've got this wrong, I have to think
everything
again,
was
right?
a lie. Everything was a lie. My whole existence was based on deception.
That's this point down here where it goes quite low and it says, oh shit, right? So then you start to climb back up again. But then what happens, Lazo, is you go backwards in time, because you essentially go, no, you go into a state of deep denial. You say, no way, this no way. Like, so that's that point there. But no, then we start to proceed in a steady trajectory upwards. And another little jump there where you realize that there's a whole internet dark web, or whatever it was called. And then we progress along here until what happens, Laszlo?
Yes. And actually, like that time of finding the so IDW, that's the intellectual dark web. That's also like a hint of hope, right? Well, look, there are others as well. There's like an existing infrastructure, an existing network of individuals who are aware of the same. They seem to be sane as well. So so you start to gain some integrity, but you're still climbing up that
you're climbing up, and you can
psychedelic ladder.
Climbing up that psychedelic corridor. That's it, exactly. So then what do we hit, Laszlo? We hit Ion.
I've been there. I mean, I think a lot of people who are listening to this have been there.
And you can see this is labeled WTAF ? And then we get a very unusual statistical phenomenon, which is as yet there's still researching what the actual reality of that is. But that is like definitely an intense period. And then you know, a few lucid dreams get thrown in, and you know, things like
it literally looks like an explosion, you know, a very odd statistical phenomenon. But the graph looks like an explosion.
Emotional explosion, exactly.
Actually, what Jimmy said to me like a few days ago, that Ion could be rebranded and given another title, which would be James and Stefan going insane. And I think it was very
live on your computer. Watch two boyos go mad.
Yes, exactly. The greatest story of all time.
That's it. And then you see what comes out of that, though, Laszlo, is the pinnacle of all psychedelic corridors. At the end of it, all psychedelic corridors is the boyoism that you encounter after ion. Now, we
Also,
all
I
know
like how you basically escaped the graph, by the way. So this is where
this line, well, this is it. This is what's called exponential excitement. Now, we all know this. We've been there, done that. You know, this is an old graph. So what I ask you, Laszlo, is what's next?
Wow.
Now, the International Centre for Boyo Studies has contacted me, and they're having problems because they've had to throw out their data.
Wow,
Because
that's a big crisis.
What is next, Laszlo?
Good question. Good question, because we have like basically Boyos here graduating and surviving this psychedelic ordeal, and I get it. Like that's actually a question that I think many of us have been asking.
Yeah. So I asked them to send me a graph, but this is all they could send me. They could just send me this. I just got to work out how to make it work. This is what they sent me.
Okay. Wow. Describe me what's happening on this scene, and where was this taken? It's a very tense moment.
I believe this is in Paris.
Of course, of course, in Paris, outside time. Okay, so what's happening on this snapshot of reality?
Well, as you can see, we've got a couple of boys here on the right who are looking worried. They're in a state of anxiety, Laszlo. They thought they had it all under control, and they'd even been able to team up, but no, I think a Dirty Harry-like figure has entered the room, and he's broken up their party big time.
It's all in their faces, by the way, because even you can see Nietzsche saying like, what is actually happening? And then Jung, it's like his reality have been blown apart. And I'm sure that he had this experience quite a few times in his life, during those times when he was writing the Red Book, for example, or even Ion, but he seems perplexed. He seems puzzled.
You can see it's serious business, and you can see why the International Centre for Boyo Studies has resorted to this visual imagery, because there's really no better way to express.
And also look at Girard's face. You can see that he is as confident and as sure in his case as a human being can possibly be. That tells me something.
He's immovable.
Yeah, he's unshakable. Yes.
Steady. His hand is steady. His eyes are steady. Yes, I agree.
We don't see Mom Spaghetti just yet, but probably if we continue, a few Boyos might have a Mom Spaghetti experience.
Okay, well, we better move on. And see how we go with this journey. I thought what we're going to look at today is a bit of jargon just to annoy Steph, and it's called interdivviduality.
Wow, that's jargon supreme. Interdivviduality. I like the ring of this.
Yeah. So the self as mimetic. Okay, so this is like, I don't know if you remember last time we had that beautiful painting of the mirror in the stormy seascape, black and white it was, and in the mirror was blank. There's nothing in the mirror, and this is again where we come back to the bleakness of Girard. And where, as you slowly read through different bits and pieces, you realize that there is no self. It's empty in there.
Wow.
No, I don't know if that's just me, but according to Girard, yeah, it's like, it's partly Girard, and it's partly this guy, Jean-Michel. Oh my God, here we go with the pronunciation.
Well, if you just go back, by the way, so it's interesting that no, like to that next slide where you see the two Boyos. No, like where you see the two Boyos in the eccentric clothing. Yeah, because just yesterday on the Boyo call, I think you had to miss it, but we actually talked a lot about style. So this is just a preview of the upcoming Boyo clothing line that we have. And this is really aligned with the eccentricity of thought. You need to represent it in style as well. So just a hint for the Boyos.
the theory here is to have something that's quite practical and very, you know, shorts are good. It's no good to get too hot. If you're a boy, you need to keep everything nice and cool.
Also, those socks are very practical because you can see that they are actually long sleeve, but you can adjust it like according to heat. So this is the Boyo idea, like stylish but practical.
And the thing is, like, if those socks fall down as they do, well, you don't have to worry because you're on trend.
Yes, exactly. And Boyoism is also about not just being on trend, but being ahead of the curve. You know, that's also like a central definition. Okay.
Yeah, being ahead of the curve with all the other boyos.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I think
no
we can move.
ties, no choking sort of ties or anything.
Still elegant though.
And no hair. Just get rid of that hair.
Yes, exactly. Practical. And I think we can move on to the next one. It's interesting, by the way, that you mentioned the mirror, because just yesterday I had a conversation with a friend, and this came up specifically about Christ as well. Like how you can look at the image of Christ as the perfect mirror, as the clear mirror, you know, in which if you look into, then now you are able to kind of imitate perfection through that mirror. You know, I don't want to really get ahead of ourselves, but it's funny that this whole mirror idea just keeps coming back to.
Yeah, interesting. So I think this is actual photo of a stage production of a play by Shakespeare called The Comedy of Errors. And in The Comedy of Errors, so Shakespeare basically took someone else's plot. It was Plautus had written a play. Shakespeare just borrowed it. And in Plautus's play, there's some twins, and they get separated from each other, and then they end up in the same town unbeknownst to each other. So what Shakespeare did was he went, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So he doubled the amount of twins in the play. So there was a twin masters and twin servants, and they got separated in their pairs of masters and servants, and then they end up in the same, but many years later, you know, when they're grown up, they end up in the same town without knowing it. And there's all these mistaken identities and confusions, and it's hilarious and farcical and slapstick and all the rest of it. And these are the servants. I can't remember the names of the servants, but anyway, and they're looking at each other and going, geez, you know, like there's someone who looks just exactly like me. But it's very interesting because, like, Girard does think that Shakespeare had a very good sense that there was this whole thing of mimetic imitation, desire, contagious desire and stuff was one of the drivers of human behavior.
Yeah, and also those facial expressions are very telling. It's kind of the same when you read Girard and get deeper into the ideas. You have the same expression in your soul. It's like, whoa, I didn't notice that before. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So moving along. Now, where did we get to last time? I'm just going to revisit where we got to last time a little bit, which is to say we had this slide at the end of our last presentation, which was in a way trying to resolve it down to something really simple. And this is one of the reasons why I think, you know, you might fall down on the side of Girard being liberating rather than bleak, because this is a simple model. It's a three-point model. And it's really about the three different ways that people might interact with one another. Given that, as we established last time, imitative behavior is a given. It's born into us. We just do it from the moment we pop out of that birth canal. We are imitating. We're off and running. And so, yeah, this model, very simple. It might remind you of another Trinity. Or I don't know if you've ever seen this image, Laszlo.
No, never before. What's on the image?
Well, I'll just go through the three different things as an overview. At the top here, we have relating to someone else as a model. as a paragon, as an exemplar, as a teacher. And this is all fine and good. You know, you see someone, you see your friend wearing a new item of clothing, and you think, and you say, oh, that looks so good. You look really good in that. That looks great. And then, you know, it's all good at that point. You're admiring it and you're inspired by it. You think, I might go out and buy a red dress with black polka dots myself. But then what happens? Something sometimes just suddenly flips until you suddenly think, you buy a red dress with black polka dots. You see one, you buy it. It's on sale. It's 40% off. It's 50% off. You can't resist. You have to buy it. And then there's an event, a social event. So what do? Do you ring your friend and tell her, I have also bought a red dress with black polka dots?
It happens to me all the time with my polka dot dresses. Yeah.
But so you can also relate to people as a model or as a rival. So that's the model as rival here on the left, where the person that you're interacting with becomes an adversary in some way. It's antagonistic, that you're competing at a level which may not be acknowledged, because, you know, you may be colleagues, or you may be like work colleagues or something, or friends or whatever. And then there's another version of kind of a more negative way of relating, which is the model as obstacle, where it's not so much active antagonism as the model or the person has become, or what they represent to you has become almost, because you can't access what they have, the desire that they have inspired in you. You can't access it. They turn into, in your mind, a kind of an obstacle or a barrier, and it oppresses you. It sort of locks you down a bit. But we're going to unpack this. This is just the introductory slide.
Yeah, on the surface, yeah.
Yeah. So should we keep going? Any questions on that?
No. I would like to dig into this, because again, this is a very Girardian pattern that on the surface it seems very simple, but it goes deep. So I think we can just continue.
Right. Well, so now here, essentially, I'm using the work of this guy, Jean-Michel Ophorlian, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a French guy who, he actually worked with Girard. He was the guy who discovered, I mean, he'd gone through sort of psychiatry school and all the rest of it, and he got to the point where he thought, oh, I think, you know, you need to understand philosophy and ethics and all this other stuff as well if you're going to really treat people. And so he went off to university again, which is where he started reading Girard. And he was so blown away that he decided he'd go and meet Girard. And he did meet with him, and they became collaborators. And because he said to Girard, I think that we can take your model and we can apply it to the whole of psychology, psychiatry, the understanding of human mind and behavior. And he persuaded Girard. And so what he essentially says, that in quite a simple book, really, again, that the primary thing is how you respond to someone, the imitative interaction that you have with someone. And then following that positioning, either you position yourself and them, well, essentially you're positioning them as an exemplar, or as an adversary, or as an oppressor. Following that, emotions respond to how you've positioned yourself. So this is saying that the first thing that happens is you imitate, and then you feel the emotion, because the emotions relate to what you've set up in your mind about it.
So, for example, what kind of emotions do you think emerge when I have that person as a model, as a paragon, exemplar, or teacher? What kind of emotions do I have?
You have positive emotions, friendship, teamwork, that sort of thing.
Admiration as well, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe just normal, you're getting on with life. You don't really think that all the things you're doing have emerged out of some imitative process. You think you're doing your own life, and you just get on with it, and you have it happy, and you do stuff. But then, you know, when you get into a situation with someone, and we've all had it, like we all know that, you know, with a job, with any job that you work in, it doesn't matter like really how shit the job is. It's like the people that you're working with that make the difference, right? So you could be in the mail room just sorting mail, and if you've got a bunch of people around you that make you laugh or whatever, like I read a biography of Clarice Cliff, the pottery makers. She used to make beautiful ceramics in the 1920s, in kind of revolutionarily colorful ceramics, Art Deco, jazz style ceramics, and they became worldwide phenomenon. But all the women that used to work in the factory, they would sing as they were painting the pots, and it's like it was part of this sort of colorful, joyous ceramics. Anyway, so you know, you could, but if you've got the most, you know, potentially ideal job in the world, you know, you're working in the Louvre in Paris, and you're the head curator, and you're getting to, you know, like make decisions about how to present Manet's a newly discovered painting by Manet, or whatever it is, right? But if you are in bad situation with your co-workers, work is hell.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm thinking, because you mentioned that Girard might be the best argument for hierarchy in itself. And because I'm just thinking, maybe we can talk about it in more detail later. But now that I think about my experience in the army as well, you know, there you, and I have my experience, let's say, in the corporate world too, two completely different environments. And in the corporate world, you do see this, like maybe you get a mentor, a coworker, a manager, and first you have this relationship where they are your teacher and you look up to them and you start to imitate them. But in a corporate environment, for example, where there aren't rigid hierarchical structures because it's kind of fluent, then after a while you will want that job. You know, those emotions will emerge. And then, for example, in the army, with the hierarchy being so rigid, that's kind of a safety mechanism against that, in a way, you know. And even if I think about the church as a hierarchy, well, you have the priest and you have the bishop, and it's not really like a competitive thing. That's the whole idea.
We'll get to that. Actually, we've got a whole side that towards the end where I wanted to bring in your experience on that, because exactly that, in a very structured hierarchy, you have aspiration to the next level, but then you don't have the soldiers fighting amongst themselves, because they're all aspiring to get to the next level, or to achieve that medal or that rank or that status, when it's all very, very clearly designed. So it's like a way of leveraging imitation, you know, your and aspiration and desire. You're desiring upwards, you're aspiring, but there's definite, very clear levels of hierarchy that you're working through, and it's all known and understood, and it's understood that you will want, and they will want you to be aspiring to the next level. I mean, it's all open. But we will get more to that later. But in the meantime, just wanted to sort of map this out.
Sure.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these two, like, just because, you know, it's best to get the bleak stuff out of the way first. Like we all know, when we get up in the morning, you always do the task you don't want to do. You always do that first, and then it's out of the way. Okay, so now
I do like some bleakness early in the day, so
that's right.
Lay it on me, yeah.
When you're feeling strong and full of life. Okay. Oh no, but there was a second part to this. We went, whoops. Oh, come back. Yeah. Okay. So what I was saying on this slide was that, like, first of all, there's the imitation, and then there's an emotive reaction to it. Right? You get antagonism or emotions of anger and stress and pressure if you're actually entered into a rivalrous relationship. you get emotions of rejection or defeat or pointlessness. If your positioning toward the rival has got to the point where you know you can't win, so you give up. And then you can have these positive emotions, which we were talking about before, about synergy and so on.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that not only do your emotions follow on from the imitative impulse, which you've barely noticed, like it's been completely subliminal. But then your cognitive mind also kicks in. Oops, back here. You end up with some rationalizations, some cognitive rationalizations. So say you've ended up in a rivalrous situation and you've got emotions of anger and resentment, and you're strategizing about how to undermine that person, and you're trying to hide it from yourself probably. Your cognitive mind will come up with lots of justifications to sort of make sense of the negative position that you've positioned yourself in, and of all the related emotions, right? You can say that person is doing this, this, and this, or that person always does that. That's like poor behavior, or that's encroaching on my territory, or it's this, or it's that way. So you can imagine the vast amount of rationalizations in one's life that one's gone through about various people who've really annoyed you.
Oh yeah, and that's, by the way, that's such an important point, because even in sales, I think that's like the first thing that a salesman, for example, needs to understand, that this is inherent to the human decision-making process. That's how you make a decision about a product, a live decision, make a decision about a person. You make it on an emotional basis, always. It's not like most of the time. It's not mostly or mainly emotional. It's 100% emotional all the time. You haven't made a decision in your life on a logical basis. You need to understand that. It does seem like you did, because another part of this decision-making process, again, always, is that you justify it through logic and through reason, through a cognitive cycle. So a great example is, for example, you're browsing on Amazon and you're looking for a shoe, and you fall in love with the shoe. You just like how it looks. And you kind of make the decision that I want this, I want to get this product, but you still keep scrolling and you read about the materials and the fabrics and the technology in the shoe.
And cost benefit analysis.
Exactly. But you already made the decision. And after you've done, like, your hot cognition, your emotions were ignited, you made the decision, and then again, it's important to be able to justify the purchase, to be able to justify the decision. Then you actually click on buy. Now, from your perspective, it looks like, well, I made a very logical decision, because that's the material that I need and really fits into my budget, and it's perfect for the purposes that I intended to use it for, blah blah blah. But again, if you trace it back, your decision stems from that emotional ignition. Because if you're not in love with that shoe, I mean, it can have the best technology and it can have like a 50% discount, whatever, you're not gonna buy it, and that's very important to understand.
Yeah. And if you want to extrapolate this sort of up to the sort of macro scale, you can see how, like, various contemporary cultural tensions are justified on both sides. Like, essentially, in these mimetic crises, you get these two sides, as we talked about before, these two huge conglomerations of conspiracies that start to mirror each other. And they start to mirror each other because the similarity is in the antagonism. They're becoming more and more antagonistic and more alike in that, and the initial sort of object that they were fighting over kind of dissolves away, and it just becomes this essentially, now you can see we've got these two tribes who've got these huge rationalized justifications for their position, the left and the right, and both of them are like rationalizing like mad to be the most scientific, the most rational, the most ethically thought through position.
Yeah, and also they do mimic the attacks as well, because
exactly.
the more you are being viciously attacked, you want to return in kind. It's and look, we are arriving back to fundamental principles, like, for example, what Jesus said about you can't fight evil with evil. Well, that's what it means. You can't fight it by imitating it. you know, but we, again,
Exactly.
we do it all the time.
Yep, we do. But so the whole thing here, which is the thing which is a little bleak, is that what Orlean is saying is that first comes imitation, and then emotions and rationalizations, your cognitive part of all of your experience, all the things you rationalize, they're all coming along behind the mimesis anyway, and which is driving the whole shebang. So anyway, let's go to the next slide. So model as rival, let's just look a little bit more deeply into that, where admiration turns to competition. We've talked a little about this. Sometimes we get so inspired that we surpass our model, and we might want to surpass our model, or we might simply surpass our model, and the whole thing becomes very awkward. But the thing to start to realize is, and this is again this whole thing of emptying out your sense of self, what you thought was yourself. Before this video, you thought you had a self.
Quite a pivotal moment in everyone's life when you realize that you don't actually have a self. Yeah, it's a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, this is not my work. This is some other person's. So when you wake up in an existential crisis tomorrow morning, what you have to start to come to grips with is that it's not so much the possessions of that person, or the position, you know, the promotion that you wish you could have got, or you should have got, you think you should have got, or you know, the trip, or the this or the that, or whatever. It's not so much the imitative desire and the envy relates to what you think, what you jump to thinking the other person has in their being, that they have a beingness in the world that is something that you wish you had. So it's the possessions or the position simply make you think that that person with those possessions or with that position must be this this really desirable thing. It's the combination of the person's being and the possession. It's not just the possession. So the person is inextricably, you know, the girl with the red dress and the black polka dots is inextricably, her actual person in your mind is inextricably bound up with the dress into this idea of their beingness that you would like to have. That's the thing that you want. You want to feel that, whatever it is you think they feel by having that thing.
That's really the question of having the right ideal. You know, it's not just their behaviors, but it's actually aspiring to be that. That's the whole idea even behind, you know, superheroes. Like, I want that, and you need that ideal that you can't reach, because actually when you reach it or surpass it even, you know, something just breaks. And when you're in that state of striving and aspiring, that really pulls you forward, and that's when you're in this state of, you know, flow, even of,
yeah, it's sometimes it's flow, but sometimes you can also feel that it's somewhat feverish. It's like you're driven to be that person in a sense, or and so I you know, you reflect back on your own experiences, and you can imagine that you can remember times probably when you've been in that state, and it's, yeah, exactly there's a very strong aspirational driving experience there that you feel. And of course it's illusory because that person is probably feeling that about some other person or some other thing, you know, or yourself, or you may even be reciprocal. You know, I remember I had you know, childhood friendships and stuff where you'd get jealous of each other, you know, and you'd sort of, there'd be a flip and flop. And so this thing that you're sort of striving towards is quite illusory, and because it's illusory, it can build up even more in your imagination, because your imagination takes it and runs with it.
Oh, exactly. By the way, I'm just I'm listening. I'm just looking for an image that I had here. on my
Cool.
desk about Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, because I think I had like such a good photo of them on the court. I found it, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so this is just a little basketball because it's close to my heart and I'm a massive Kobe Bryant fan.
Should we
So
go out of this share? I'll stop the
oh
shares.
oh
Oh, you
yeah,
can.
yeah, if you
Yeah,
can
I'll
just
stop the share so people can see that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can see here Michael Jordan, who is arguably the best basketball player, the greatest of all time, the GOAT. And he was Kobe Bryant's idol, really, growing up. And this is just such a good image because they had like a very similar build. And in general, like Kobe was just really trying to be like him and imitate him. And I just really love this picture. You can see the Michael Jordan here already at the end of his career, you know, last season, and Kobe just starting out. And it's a teaching moment. And I just found this picture to be, you know, quite
Yeah, it's
representative of that
beautiful. A
striving.
teaching moment. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I remember you saying last time about in oh no, we were talking about, was it Rocky? Yeah, Rocky, the Rocky
Yeah.
films, where Rocky strives and strives to be like this person, and eventually he agrees to fight him, and they fight, and because Rocky does so well, the guy agrees to teach him, and that is very positive, imitative. And especially in sports and things like that. Again, there are levels and hierarchies and degrees, steps. That the whole idea of an academic degree is about a step, a degree up, and another degree. Like, and this degree, this separation by degree, is the word that Shakespeare used when he was writing about this, when in Julius Caesar. Yeah. So anyhow, yes. So the thing to remember is that you want that being, and that being is illusory in a sense, but it's and I think if everyone can think of like times when they've been in those situations, and if it goes bad, if it goes well and the guy agrees to, that isn't bothered by you competing with them, in a sense, it drives them forward as well. And then you take them on as an apprentice and so on and so forth. It's all very that's positive. But you can see how easily it can go bad. I mean, the person who's being imitated can feel threatened. I don't know if you've been in situations where your employer or your boss is just like really threatened by you, or whatever. So so it can go bad.
And it does happen. It does happen,
Yeah.
especially in the corporate world. I've had personal experiences with that, and I've also seen it in other companies. It's just so common.
And it can make your life a misery. So let me just see if I can get to the next one. Okay, yeah. So this was just an additionally bleak example that I wanted to bring up.
Well, good for this Boyo though.
Yeah, but it's the same Boyo on the left.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's why I say that good for him, because he did work on his physical prowess.
No. The one on the left is the after photo. The one on the right is the before photo.
What? How did that
happen?
The
one on the right is because this Boyo, and I just found it on the internet. I hope he's not watching, but he had anorexia.
Oh.
And so, yeah, just to be additionally bleak, I thought I'd throw a bit of anorexia in, Laszlo.
Oh, because that's also imitation at its core, right?
That's right. And the thing is, like Girard wrote a whole book about anorexia as mimetic desire. And I used a Boyo here, but like, young women, and this is actually, I probably should have put a young woman here, or because it's not just men that are competitive, and you would know that, like, but anorexia is a classic case of where you've got a model, and actually in this case you've got real models, the catwalk models and so on, being imitated. And what Orlean argues is that the anorectic woman is driven to achieve the sense of being that they project, I suppose, or see in those beautiful models or those successful glamorous models. And they are driven by competitive rivalrousness to get thinner than their friends and thinner than the models, and they are that's what drives the disease.
Literally to death. Yeah.
Literally to death. And what it does is the imitative, desirous, rivalrous energy overrides even those autonomic functions, those necessary basic functions of and they talk a lot that this desire can sometimes and often does override any sense of pleasure as well. So it overrides, you know, joy or good feelings. It becomes the, and this is when people get stuck in a rivalrous position. Like, you know, I suppose in a sense, given that we all do this, we move in and out of it, and we you know, bring ourselves to a state of equilibrium in one way or another. But if people get stuck in a particular phase of the rivalrous situation, and they can't enable themselves to see that it began, like that their problem began as them wanting, envying someone essentially, or wanting what another had, because that is to see reality. Because if imitation does come first, followed by emotions, and followed by cognitive rationalizations, and then potentially followed by a pathology, the reality is that is how time progresses forward for human beings. You know, that's how we become who we are. You know, we get created by every individual interaction that we have. And what they're saying, which I thought was really profound, is that like our sense of self gets kind of dispersed and then recreated with every social interaction. As we bounce off of the imitative process. But if people get caught in this sense that they wanted that thing or whatever it is, and they don't understand the origins of it, then they're actually denying the whole real progress of time and real progress of how the relationship
And
develops.
then in just like in every situation, if you then build your actions on deception or a lie, it can never lead to anything good.
You can't resolve it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Well, and
Whereas
it's
you
very,
know,
it's fascinating how what you said, that it can even override the autonomous functions. It's like that powerful.
Yeah. And so so some of the kind of emotions I've got here: anger, conflict, blame and guilt, discontent. So you're discontent if you're envying someone, and you know, sometimes desperate and paranoid as well. Paranoid. And this is just my brainstorming ideas. I'm just trying to interpret this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like, God, I'm not an expert. I'm only a boyo.
Yeah. Or a boy.
I'm not a boyo. I'm not a boyo. I have to tell myself. Okay. No. Anyway, going right along. What's the next one? The model as an obstacle. So this is this other form that it can take, and as I was saying, if you're driven in that sort of almost feverish state of aspiring to be like someone like, you know, Michael Jordan or whatever, and Michael Jordan rejects your imitation, or you injure yourself in some way, or this picture is the one that everyone recognized. I didn't have much time, but this is the guy in that film Love Actually, who falls in love with his best friend's wife, and they marry. You see, they're married, and that's it. There's nothing can be done. It is complete obstacle, barrier. So the kinds of emotions that come out of this situation are things like depression, nihilism, pointlessness. These are, again, my own, you know, these are probably what, I don't know, not technical. Resignation and feeling trapped, you know, like say you're in a close relationship with someone, and you're trying to 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 be interacting model to model, but they are rivalrous, or they don't want to feel that you're modeling on them, and even though you can't, no one can help doing this. And there's a constant rejection of your attempt to model, and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, this is model as obstacle. So this is the third part of the triangle, and this is like where your desire can never be realized. And even though the desire is illusory, so if you can understand what's going on and you're in this state, you can realize that actually, it never was real. It never was my being, and that was an illusory idea of their being anyway. And the person, the young woman who my best friend married, my desire for her was partly because my best friend desired her, and it was a contagious sense. And then of course the process of prohibition, like if you prohibit someone from something, say in a marriage situation like that, then it only makes the desire even more inflamed, but it's all illusory, you see. And it would all, and the point is that if you actually ever obtained that young woman, I mean, look at her, talk about anorexia and that pouty lips, that, what's her name, that actress? I don't know. But anyway, the whole thing would just like collapse, and you'd realize that she's just a ordinary person, and she's got all the problems that anyone else has got, and she's not this ideal, person for you. Then you'd have to go, you're facing down the tunnel of, whatever it is, years and years of, actually trying to relate to someone, which is never, never ideal.
Yeah, and actually this is very interesting, because you and I have been talking about what kind of themes should we look at Girard through, and one is like love, because that poses the question, like, is all love just mimetic, and I actually might have a good thread to kind of set out on with different kinds of love, because love is not just this monolith. It actually has multiple forms in the 3 types of love, including agape, for example. So maybe we can talk about that later and see what's genuine, what's real love, and what's mimetic love. But also with these emotions. So Girard talks about the 10 Commandments, and how in the 10 Commandments, the first couple of rules, it's all about what not to do. Do not steal, do not kill. But then he says that the final law kind of underpins everything, as that's the only law that points to desire. It's like, do not desire what is your neighbor's, and even Jesus says, and this is Mark 9:47, and if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye, to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell. And in another translation, it would be, and if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. And there is this word stumble and stumbling block and sin. And Girard talks about this a lot, that this is actually the obstacle.
Yes,
the desire is the obstacle. Yeah.
Exactly, because it's a construct in your mind more than anything else. And as we've talked about, like, there's really positive, like, motivational aspects to it, but it is a construct in your mind. If it becomes negative or pathological, and it's stuck in there. Yeah, and it's exactly. That's
because you can take it in the bud this way. You can really go. I think what this points to is the same when Jesus says that, well, if you even look at a woman with lust, well, that's a sin, And before the laws, it was all about these very detailed descriptions of proper sexual conduct, But then Jesus goes to the source. It's like, no, it's about the desire. And it's impossible also. Like, if you think about it, it's a ridiculous notion that, I cannot even look at a woman lustfully. But actually, that's what you should strive to do. I mean, if you want to be liberated, because if you don't go there, you will remain to be a slave and you don't know where it's coming from, because you think it's like, I don't know why I keep wanting this thing.
Exactly. And it's like, and you do become a kind of a slave to these kinds of desires, because they are so they hook into you very easily. I mean, you know, on the one hand, yes, I agree what you're saying, but I just want to say as a caveat that, like, our brains are all filled with these mirror neurons.
Yeah.
So it's something that, one of the reasons it's liberating is because you can go, it's not just me doing this awful, terrible thing. It's like everybody, every human being that ever lived has done this. And that's why there's so much literature about these things. And there's also, but yeah, I think it is liberating. And what there's that phrase, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. But you see, you can't be vigilant about something that you don't really understand, the process that's going on in your head. You don't
Exactly.
understand what the mechanism's happening to you.
Exactly.
I was looking today at social media, and there was I think it must have been a young boy who asked this question about love. See, said, I'm going to ask this, but okay, I'm going to ask this, but so what, he says. So here we go. What happens when you like a girl that hasn't been signaled as desirable to other men, but you just like her anyways? Has someone told you deep down that girl was desirable? You know, like, he's kind of going like, how unconscious is it? He says, I highly respect Dr. Girard's theory, and I think he's right, but I need to understand that if you like a girl that no one else likes or is not top, then what is that?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and so I think we could probably do something quite good on love, the theme of love.
Definitely, because I'm full of questions, and I only have questions about it. And I had the same question, by the way, because even if I think about my own romantic past, I see examples of both. I see examples when I was actually quite disinterested in the girl, but because of the mimetic escalation, I did choose to get together with them. And then in other cases, it was inexplicable. I can't, or I couldn't trace it back to any sort of mimetic source.
Yeah, well, I thought what occurred to me was what you'd said last week, Leslie, when you talked about how, you know, through your whole lifetime, you've been given images and ideas about what you should be desiring, or what's desirable according to your
the Fulton Sheen quote.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in your head. And so when I responded to it, because I sort of said, and maybe also that the girl, as I talked about last time, desires herself, and, you know, and knows how to project that sense of desire. And you're picking up on that, right? Because, like, that's what young women do. I mean, so aware of their sort of female beauty and their desirability, and they're aware of how to transmit it. And it's like, it's just something that could be,
and it's attractive, and it's attractive if a woman likes herself, and
yes.
yeah.
Or I said also she might have been attracted to him, right? So therefore he's attracted to the desire that she's feeling, and it becomes this mutual escalation, simply because, you know, he picks up on her desire for him, sort of thing.
But maybe it can be a closed loop. I don't know. I'm just throwing it in there, you know. So maybe it's like when you choose the right partner, that can be like as good as the dynamic gets.
That's right. And I mean, it doesn't, just because at some level it's imitative, it doesn't really negate the feeling. It's what you then go on, what relationship you then go on to build with that person, I suppose. And you know, and you know, then you'll go through like blissfulness or pain, you know, relative to the different states of mimetic desire in the triangle that you go through every day. Unless you really you nail it, and then you just get to heaven.
Yeah, and talking about heaven, and we can unpack this when we talk specifically about Girard and love. But maybe the idea here is that that's as good as it gets. That kind of, you know, mutual cycle of desire between the two of you, but then you still need to underpin and frame the entire relationship with shared values, and then maybe it's as stable as it can be.
shared values, good communication, like, you
Yeah.
know, like learn how to communicate with the person who you've probably chosen who's probably your opposite personality type. You're like,
Yeah,
good luck
yeah,
with
yeah.
that. But like, you know, it goes, you know, okay, etc.
Mm.
But that's moving. Shall we move on? So now we get to the fun part, the happy aspect of imitation.
Mm.
Oops, come back. I keep doing it. So this is model as model. So this is where, like we were talking about before, about the value of hierarchy. It's like we should you know, we should have a video which is titled "The Best Argument for Hierarchy Yet." You know,
Mm-hmm.
you heard Jordan
Probably we will.
Peterson, you
Yeah.
heard, but you know, wait till you hear what Girard says about hierarchy. But anyway, so there's two. I'm dividing this. I mean, I don't know. There's probably 50 other ways of looking at this, but like I've divided this into two ways of having a positive model as model relationship with someone. You can have model as superior, which we've already talked about, which is the teaching moment that you showed us of Jordan, the basketballers.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Yeah.
Michael Jordan and yeah. The teaching moment. That was a perfect illustration of this idea of the model as a superior, in a sense, as a paradigm that you paragon that you want to aspire to, that you are aspiring to, and this is particularly how the whole military hierarchy works, and other strong hierarchies like that. What you have is an outward aspiration, or an upward aspiration to the next rank, prevents infighting amongst the rank that you're in, right? Or, you know, in an old not monarchy, what was that form of government? You know, where you've got kings and dukes and
Oh,
peasants.
so what do you
What are
think
they
about
called?
the monarchy, or what are you
Yeah, you
referring to?
know, feudal, a
Oh, the
feudal system.
feudal society. Okay.
Feudal system.
Yeah.
You know, and like everyone knows their place, right? And
Mm.
people, and this stabilizes communities, because the sense of competition is suppressed by this strong taboo around blurring of hierarchical boundaries. And in Julius Caesar, the play by Shakespeare, what Shakespeare draws out is that as the rivalrous behaviors begin amongst the top levels of the army, the whole hierarchy, it spreads contagiously through the hierarchy, and so that the boundaries are blurred to the extent where they end up in this murderous conspiracy against the great Caesar and things like that. But it does, when it's working well, it stabilizes communities and it leverages imitation. So given that we're all imitating, given that everyone's in an imitative state, if you've got people aspiring to the next level of heroism, then and working together towards like winning battles and stuff, then you're actually leveraging this imitative energy to a really potentially good end, of course, except that when you hit a globalized world where you no longer can really have wars. I think this has been discussed in the Boyo sphere before. I mean, it's like you know, it's this realization that war is quite there's a prohibitive situation going on with the technology that's at our fingertips for completely just destroying the whole world. So this throws it all into this kind of crisis that we're in at the moment, which is like, you know, you have Hamlet in Shakespeare, who's indecisive about whether he's going to kill his uncle or not. And part of this is a kind of almost an ambivalence about whether he's still really angry enough to murder someone, you know. And what Girard says that Shakespeare in that play perfectly expresses where we are balanced in our current situation between the revelation of Christ's death and not having fully integrated that revelation. So we know that we can't scapegoat people, but we're still encountering all the impulses towards that. So we end up in this pressure cooker, which is not hasn't got an outlet anymore, because we're not doing pagan ritual sacrifice.
Yes.
We're not letting off the steam through the murder of a scapegoat. So the steam is building up. So either we resolve it, or it's going to, anyway, it's polarizing, and we all know that. We won't get too bleak.
Yeah, and also like an interesting note here from Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. A friend sent me this note that Western culture as a whole, whether Christian or post-Christian, is under the illusion that it is moving further and further away from Christ, like the Emmaus disciples, while it retains a false sacrificial conception of him. It is struggling to rid itself of Christ for good. But at the very point when it is under the impression of moving in quite a different direction, Christ is to be found beside it. And he has been for a long time opening the scriptures. So this is, I think this really captures the idea of the revelation. You try to move away from it because it's very, very, very uncomfortable, and you can get into the illusion that, we kind of left it behind, but you can't leave it behind. It's done. It's like,
you can't. And
as Christ said, it is done,
Yeah, and we are probably the most compassionate, cultures. In a sense, we've got very heightened awareness of compassion that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have Christ and the teachings of the Gospels. You see, and people don't realize that was a shift in thinking. But anyway, coming back to the model, if you're able to see someone in that way, then you've got learning, you've got growth and aspiration, you've got order and hope and achievement and things like that. So, but then there's another way of slightly different way of interacting.
And
model.
Just to note there on the previous one, just again with Michael Jordan, for example, he became a superstar pretty quickly, but he was still struggling to win a championship for years, and that really kept driving him. And when he hit the peak, he actually entered into a crisis. So after they won 3 championships, three-peat it's called, and it was unique in NBA history, then he actually burnt out. He said that the most difficult thing for him is to motivate himself, because he was like really, really competitive, and being competitive, it's being really rivalrous, and it can fuel you, it can drive you forward, but then when that's gone, it just pops, and then there's nothing.
And even if you achieve the thing, it's a cliche these days about people who achieve wealth, or they achieve or whatever it is, and the reality is never going to give you the feeling that you thought you were going to have. That is found the next time you find an object that is alluring to you in that same way, or an object or a state of being that is. So I was thinking, in a way, this is this motivating force that keeps people positive in the world. It's the whole creative force, in a sense, and you do often get a bit of a down flatness when you've achieved something.
And actually, this is also kind of a response that Christ has, to this predicament, to this situation, by framing his teaching in, look, I'm imitating God himself, perfection itself. You are a fallen being, and just keep imitating me, because you will never be able to achieve it, like literally to your deathbed, you won't be able to do it, but this is still what you need to strive for. And if this sinks in, this is like a mode of being, this is really something that you can set your eyes on, and it puts you in this constant state of progress and positive action, and that was, in that sense, unique, of someone offering perfection, God himself, and really connecting it to our fallen human reality and serving as a bridge between the two. I think that's why he's also being seen as a king, which is the pontifex, which translates to king.
The highest.
Yeah, pontifex translates to bridge, actually. So the king is the bridge. The king is the bridge between the divine and the human, and he was like the king with the capital K. You know, that you can just keep imitating and you'll never succeed, and that's the life well lived. At least that's the proposition.
And I think you can also tie it back to McGilchrist and the left brain and the right brain. Is you've got the right brain, which is scanning the horizon and moving toward some unknown creative thing, and then the left brain grasps it and nails it down, and at that point it becomes history, it becomes the past. And so the future is always beckoning. The future is desire, in a sense, drawing you forward, and achievement is the left brain, and it becomes rationalized and nailed down, and you move on to the next. You go and look for the next meal, essentially.
Yeah. And it's interesting, by the way, like another note on Michael Jordan, because I mean, now the NBA is part of this discussion, is once he achieved what he achieved, that position of being the greatest of all time, then people immediately started to project on him that no one will ever be as good as him, and they were calling him Black Jesus. So that was that was the name that he got in the NBA by the other players. You know, again, just this idea of something perfect and unattainable, and they needed it. They needed it, and the impact of Michael Jordan on the NBA and also just sports in general is unprecedented, and it never happened since.
And the other thing, like someone like that who's in a position who's attracting people's emulous desires, it's like it's like pop stars or movie stars or whatever who it can be really quite dangerous because they become a vessel for all these people's desires, and it can be quite again, it's got its downside. You can see how these things are good, and especially if you're conscious and they're sort of driving forward, and you can maybe even see these things as a game or something like, I know I'm being motivated by this particular energy, and it's a current of energy, and I just don't need to take it totally seriously. I can kind of run with it and enjoy it. And then when it kind of falls apart and comes to nothing, because often things do in life, you can let go easily too. You don't feel completely flattened by it. Okay, so moving on. Model. So this is another way of being positive with desire, in a sense. And this is where we were just touching on it before, where you were saying, perhaps it's the best thing you can get when you've got like a partnership where you've got both people in the partnership seeing each other as a model. And we talked about this last time. We were saying, how do you end up in a intimate relationship that is actually functioning well? And maybe one of the ways of doing it is to see each other as a model. And if you can keep that in mind, it's going to bring mutual respect and all sorts of things. But you can do creative projects together. See your life as a creative project together, and you're likely to have different skills and be able to value that in each other. Or if you've got the same skills, maybe you can work together as a team and all that sort of stuff. And so now, last time, Laszlo, I didn't sing, and I'm not going to sing this time either, but I do have a clip. I do have a clip. I know everyone's disappointed, but
I sure am.
But I do have a lovely clip to end on, because I was, this whole mutual models, see each other as a model, is about synergy. Because if you're seeing, if you're working with if you've ever worked in a team where everybody is bolstering each other I mean, sometimes it works. I mean, it's not all that common, but sometimes you get a little team. Like I had a couple during my career, like once or twice, and I had one in particular where there was just a really good feeling, but no, you know, and like the whole team, you know, we all had different functions and we were all performing really highly. And we, you know, have these meetings and there'd be lots of jokes and laughter, and then people would go in and everyone had different roles. Again, like there was a hierarchical, it was actually a training job. So there was like people who developed the training and did all the conceptual work, and then there was the presenters, and that was often the same person that you had to present it and all that. And then there was the administrative team, and who did all the logistics, all the complicated logistics, and prepared the materials, and the, you know, the teams worked really well together, and there was not a sense of rivalry. It was just really synergistic, as a very buzzy word. Synergy, collaboration, flow, achievement, but also humility, because if you're always in a learning position from people that you're interacting with, and that, especially if they're in a learning position towards you, then there's a lot of, you know, exploration, you know, it's an exploration mentality, and you can achieve something more than the sum of your parts as a team, for example, because you're interacting in that way.
That's interesting. And also, you have this idea called, or approach or philosophy called extreme ownership. It was introduced by Jocko Willink. And Jocko Willink is an ex-Navy SEAL, and now he advises business executives on business strategy. And the idea of extreme ownership is that everything is your fault. So if you work in a team and something goes wrong, it's always your fault. And you would say, no, I mean, what do you mean it's always my fault? It's not always my fault. But the idea is that you do try to frame it. You look for the for that thing that you did wrong that actually resulted in things falling apart. And a crucial component of this is actually humility. And this, I mean, we did this in our business as well. And it immediately became a thing, because if that's reinforced as being the optimum mode of being, and just in general how we interact and how we approach work, things just continue to grow, you know. But if we don't have that, it inevitably leads to some sort of a, you know, blame cycle, and that's when you can actually get competitive. But if you can always say it, you actually have to always just put up your hands and say that, look, I messed up, and it was actually my fault. I just see this connected to humility directly, which is again something that you don't do naturally, I think. And this is probably, like, today in society, one of the biggest problems, or maybe even the biggest problem, is pride itself. And that's also a very Christian thing, because that's the opposite of humility. I mean, you're being told that you should be proud of everything all the time, you know, that's really on the flag of today's society. Be proud, you know, whatever you are, whatever you do, just make sure that you're proud. And actually you should be doing exactly the opposite, you know. You should be doing exactly the opposite. Like you should be,
you need to say to yourself quite often, you know, but this is not really my doing, in a sense, you know. It's yeah. But the other thing I was thinking when you were saying that, though, was like, I've, you know, I've struggled with, like, trying to work out what I did wrong in relationships which have gone bad, or whatever, or arguments or whatever. And but this model of this Girardian sort of model makes it easier for me to do that. Like, I feel like I'm able to go, I can just simply go, well, what was the point in the whole process where I shifted from seeing that person as a model to seeing them as a rival, or seeing them as an obstacle? And can I go back to undo that, or can I see it so clearly, see my own move there so clearly that I can let go of it? And it just seems so simple and clear in terms of understanding you know, where dynamics have gone wrong or whatever. So right, so what I'll do is I'll stop share and I'll give you a little musical clip to end with.
Please.
Have I got another slide? I can't remember. Oh yeah, where does this leave us?
Bleak or liberating? Well, I'm not sure if we actually have an answer just yet, because the proposition, as like the proposition of Christ, is a difficult one. You know, I mean, it does hold promise, but at the same time, it's very, very difficult to do, and it's quite a responsibility and quite a heavy cross to take on, right? But I personally, maybe it's because I'm a glass half full kind of person. I do see liberation in it, because I do get this weird satisfaction whenever I see deception being exposed. You know, I just get a kick out of it. I just
even if it's your own self-deception.
Yes, even that. I really, really love it. It's so that's why I think that it's a message of hope. I think it's maybe even the opposite of bleak.